works with Quadrangle Architects, and there she is responsible for keeping up to date with knowledge on not only the growing environmental issues, but also ensuring that sustainability is a top priority in her company's decision-making process. She's rooted in a deep passion for the environment and was appointed to the 2010 Board of Directors for the Toronto chapter of the Canadian Green Building Council, and she participated in the public consultation process for Toronto Green Standard as well as the Toronto Green Roof Bylaw. Her growing accolades and accomplishments for her work in green building design allow her to maintain close ties with Quadrangle and the community. We're very pleased to welcome Michelle Xuereb. Just my first name started.
So just in terms of a bit of an agenda, I'm going to do just a bit of an introduction to the tools of project management and sustainability. This is kind of, I mean, I talk about sustainability a lot, talk about architecture a lot. I am trained as an architect. And this is new for me, trying to frame those two things together. So it was kind of fun to do, actually. And so when I spoke with Marissa, one of the things she said was, why don't you try to frame it within the work that you've done? So what I'm going to do is take you through a couple of projects and talk about how I feel these tools were used. Project management. Really, when I think about project management, it's all about the tools for managing a project, for managing people. So you have to understand general kind of tools of management, as well as have special knowledge about, in this case, the construction industry and the management of facilities. So there's also the information that is specific to the industry that you're working in. And as well, you have to have a relationship with your supporting disciplines, those people being your architects, engineers, your lead consultants. And so really, project management is the kind of the art of directing and coordinating projects. And when it comes to construction, there seem to be some key things. It's all about cost and time and quality, as well as tying into issues of sustainability. One of the opportunities as the project manager that I see is that the project manager overlaps with everybody within the process. You're thinking about time, you're thinking about money, you're thinking about how people use their time, how things get done, how resources are distributed. This works very well when I think of something called the triple bottom line. When you think about people, planet, and profit. Those being the three keys. So when you integrate each of these things into your decision-making process, what you have is a framework where you're thinking kind of more holistically, not just about one single decision at a time, but where you're applying these principles to everything that you do. And as the project manager, because you touch on and know about everything that's going on in a project, your opportunity to bring up these issues within the process is really one of the largest. So even if you do have a lead consultant, they're going to play a very particular role in the project. Chances are they won't be at every single meeting. They won't have the kind of relationship that you do with the client or with the facility operator, which really does increase your chances for success in terms of sustainability. Traditionally in the building industry, we've gotten really, really good at our individual things that we do. You know, for the architect, it's all about how it looks and the materials that we use. Mechanical engineers, it's all about the HVAC system, the water, how it's pumped through the building. One of the things that's happened over time, though, is construction's gotten quite litigious. And what that's meant is that everyone's divided into their own little silos. They have their specialty information, they kind of keep it to themselves, and they say, no, this is all that I'm responsible for, this is all I'm going to do. You want me to bring fresh air into your building, I'm going to do that for you, and this is how. Just give me the box and I'll put it in. When we're talking about sustainability, or we're talking about the triple bottom line, what we're starting to talk about here is trying to overlap the disciplines, trying to bring people to the table earlier to have the conversations they need to have so that you don't end up with a lot of glass facing south with no shading and then a really expensive HVAC system to cool it. What you want to do is you want to have people at the table right at the outset talking about things like building orientation, amounts of glazing, thermal bridging, thermal breaks, and how you deal with those things. And then talking about right-sizing equipment to work with the space that you're designing. This diagram is it's kind of interesting, maybe kind of hard to follow, but it's about the integrated design process. So again, traditionally, the way design is done, the client says, I have a project, they call an architect, the architect designs something, here's the box, then they call the mechanical electrical engineers, they're already halfway through design by the time they bring the engineers on board, and the engineers just need to stuff their systems into the building that they're given. The idea behind the integrated design process is to have more of an iterative, non-linear process. So if you see, in terms of amount of time, starting at the very beginning in pre-design, what we're showing there is having all the disciplines at the table talking about things on day one, throwing ideas around, so that when you are talking about siting a building on a site, you have those people there to bring their issues up from day one. And so the idea there is that you're building a team, you're building the vision for the project together, which also you can't really underestimate how big a deal that is. If everybody at the table sees the vision and believes in the vision, those people are then going to do their best to push those issues forward. If you bring somebody in when it's too late, you can't underestimate the amount of resistance that person can provide on a project. It can be really problematic when you have somebody who says, well, you didn't bring me here anyway, so I'm just going to do it this way, and then they don't put their best ideas forward. So the idea behind the integrated design process is bring people on early, put the time and the energy in early, have workshops that talk about energy, have workshops where you talk about form, where all of these things are brought together right at the very beginning. Some of the challenges within this that I found in our own work processes have been that the way fees are structured. Oftentimes, you'll be given a site and they'll say, how much square footage can I fit onto this site? And you go away and you mass it up and you say, oh, well, 6 times coverage, we'll go for rezoning, we'll do this, we'll do that, it'll take about a year, and boom, you get it rezoned, and all of a sudden you're stuck with the mass that you have. And you have a building that doesn't fit properly on the site, right? And you're living with that and the impacts in terms of energy use for the rest of the life of the building. So you can see that it's inherently problematic. And so one of the things that I'm trying to work with the developers that we're working with is to try and rearrange the fee structures so the fees are brought forward earlier, and that we can pay people to do the work up front such that they see the value kind of down the road. And that is, I think, one of the keys. And as project managers, I think that's a place where I think understanding some of these greater issues is really, really important to the process. So I'm just going to talk about a few projects. So I'm going to go from kind of some of our earliest work to some of our later work. It's just 4 projects. I'm going to just touch on them briefly. This is a site in downtown Markham, Birchmount Highway 7. It's with the Remington developers, the Remington Group, who are a really interesting kind of developer. They basically had this sort of larger vision that they wanted to know that sustainability was coming down the pipe. It was the kind of the early 2000s. And they were saying, okay, this is what we want to do. We think that this is something that's going to sell buildings. So back to the question, somebody over there asked a question about marketing, which I thought was a really good one. When I had first started, I remember thinking, well, if it's just about marketing, then it has no validity. I actually have changed my mind about that, because what I've realized is that these people have an agenda. It's people, planet, profit, right? You have to think about all of those things. You can't talk about one in isolation of the other. If you're going to be talking to a developer, you can't say, well, it's about doing the right thing. It's about well, some of them, yes, want to do that as well. But also, just think about it. They borrow all this money, and they want to see it sell. That's part of what they're doing, right? That's how they're running their business. It's how they're feeding their families. One of the things that LEED has brought to the table, which has been kind of interesting, is that places really are selling faster because of it. And now everyone's jumping to do it, okay? And so even though marketing is the catalyst for it, the outcome is still good in that we're making better buildings. On downtown Markham, one of the best parts about it was they engaged Quadrangle to do the master plan of it. And so we did end up bringing some of the larger site consultants on board really, really early to start to talk about things like street morphology and to talk about stormwater systems. How are we going to manage the stormwater? And the system for this particular site is really amazing. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but part of the focus of it was where they were putting it in relation to transportation, in relation to having mixed use, pedestrian friendly. So to speak to Steve's issue about there's energy and then the other piece is transportation. These guys were thinking about this from the outset, which gave us a lot of opportunity to have an impact. Just a couple of images. These are some of the first buildings that got built. They're a mid-rise. And so if you imagine Markham, this is really what Markham looks like, right? Usually it's subdivision housing. And so here we were talking about some mid-rise residential, which is kind of interesting. Pedestrian scale, we used a lot of kind of local materials. And if you notice, they're not all normal, right? They're actually punched windows, which means you're actually starting to think about and manage energy properly. And you'll notice that there's overhangs. And I like the image right over there. It starts to talk about waste diversion. I think Orlando had mentioned diverting waste, and this is all about kind of doing the separation on the site itself. What was interesting about this project is because Remington was the developer and also the builder, and they had bought into the idea right from day one, they wanted to make it happen, okay? And we've been working with them now for close to 10 years. This project continues. We're into some of the commercial buildings now. But I've seen their interest wax and wane. And depending where their interest level has been, that has been the amount of participation we've had back in terms of LEED. And in terms of their ability to produce the proper payments for it. Our next project was run in a different kind of contract method, because this is the other piece that really affects it, is what's the contract? So we did the MTO service centers, so you know the ones that on 401, 400, the ones that were shut down where everyone was screaming about not getting a bathroom break on the long drives. Anyways, so those, there were 20 of them, and we worked on those. The interesting thing here to me, boring diagram, but is that it was what's called the DBFM program. So it's Design, Build, Finance, Maintain. So it's the province of Ontario that owns the land. It was a design build process, but the company that engaged the design builder was actually also the company that was financing the project as well as maintaining the project. So all of a sudden you have this really kind of interesting thing where the project manager was the representative of the DBFM group. Okay, so that person represents where the money's coming from, and they represent the people that are going to do an ongoing maintenance. And those were the people that hired the contractor, and then the contractor hired the architects and engineers. So you can imagine it's sort of upside down from traditionally how contracts are done. What was interesting in that is because they have to maintain these projects going forward for 50 years, they cared about the energy use. They cared about the water use. They cared about what was going to happen. There are 50 sites. We did them as prototypes. So we came up with kind of a standard design of various sizes, various materials. We looked at changing materials up in various places. There were some things that were inherently wrong with that process, and there were some things that were inherently good. One of the best things was that we got to do the durability credit, which is a specific credit to LEED Canada. which means that the project was reviewed at the earliest stages for what the service life was meant to be. It's meant to have a service life of 50 years. So you can't choose a material unless you know how long it's going to last, right? If you want the building to fall apart in 10 years, you put, you know, product A. If you want it to live for 50 years, you get product B. The bonus here as an architect was, instead of going with the thin set, glued on fake stone that chips and looks terrible, we got real stone with a full cavity wall construction, which is what you want, copper rain screen construction. And that type of system actually requires zero maintenance over 50 years, which was fantastic. So it meant that we got to use better materials, we got to use zinc instead of painted metal. There were all kinds of really amazing things that happened. And the decisions were made at the level of the project manager. Okay, so the person who was putting the money out there was thinking, well, I'm going to spend this much now, but over time, this is what's going to happen. So just take a look at some of these things. There's natural daylighting, natural stone brought into the building. They're basically fast food restaurants. But if you look at you can see the landscaping here, kind of indigenous landscaping, zero irrigation required for this. And then you can see that we've used natural wood trellises to shade the windows. View at night. The next project is in downtown Toronto. It's Chorus Entertainment. This first little diagram talks a bit, I'm going to start again with talking a bit about the players in it, because I think you can't really talk about sustainability and management without talking about who the players are. So the desire for sustainability kind of came from multiple directions. So at the top you can see Waterfront Toronto and LEED ND. So Waterfront Toronto had set out with the idea of going for LEED for neighborhood development. So they have 240 acres down on the waterfront, which they said, we're going to follow LEED ND, this is how we're going to do it. And it means every building within there has to be LEED Gold, is the target that they set. Chorus Entertainment, meanwhile, they're a company that's made up of multiple companies that they've acquired. So they bought Q107, they bought Edge 102. So they're basically radio and broadcast. So really exciting, upward-moving company. They inhabited an existing Liberty Village, okay, which is all old kind of warehouse buildings downtown from the manufacturing industry. What had happened is they were outgrowing it. The buildings weren't designed to do what they needed to do. And if you think of Steve's diagrams for the amount of energy that those buildings in the 1920s were using, I actually think that a lot of that and why those buildings are using so much energy is because they were designed to work one way, and now we're trying to plug other systems and other uses into them that are not conducive to how they were designed and built. And the upgrades haven't been made to make them happen that way. So here they were in this location. They were right downtown. They were very accessible by public transit. They've got a very young, very creative staff. And so they were feeling the movement from inside. Already a group inside the company had said, we want to do something about sustainability and rebuilding. So they were feeling that. They were feeling the pressure from the city. And they were looking around. They didn't want to own a building. They were looking around for a building to rent. And so there was this new building coming up on the east waterfront. Okay? That new building was going for LEED Core and Shell. They said, well, they're going for LEED Core and Shell. They're going for LEED for neighborhood development. Well, we're going to go for LEED for commercial interiors with our interior. So these are all the players, okay? This is where they were previously located. This is where they moved down to, all into one building on the east waterfront. This is what it looks like from the water, so that's the shell of it. This is the site itself, so what we've done here is put together a little diagram. The red box in the middle is Union Station. It's about a 5-minute walk to downtown Toronto and to Union Station. Right beside it, the little gray spot with the pink dots on it, that's Sugar Beach. I don't know if you've been there or seen the images from it, but it's really kind of amazing. New water park. All the green spaces clearly are green spaces. This neighborhood itself has its own integrated stormwater management system. It's, again, kind of amazing. The orange stripe along the waterfront is a boardwalk. Reinforcing that boardwalk are a whole bunch of water holding tanks. Okay, that's what's supporting it. The water comes down, it gets collected into these storage tanks, gets pumped up and run through an urban park so that you can see the water being cleaned, natural UV treatment into the next step and the next step. And it goes back into Lake Ontario cleaner than it was. So when these guys chose to move down here, they didn't just choose the building, they chose the neighborhood as well. So what that meant is they had to tie into various systems. The base building had a cistern that it was already providing. It had a large atrium for natural light. A new bio wall was designed and planned for the main atrium space. And they also had, I think it's about 650 square meters of green roof. Ground floor, so the blue spaces are the chorus only spaces, they're technical spaces. The yellow is kind of chorus social space, and the white is public space, okay? The main red path is a public pathway through the building itself. One of the requirements in terms of the neighborhood plan was to be able to interact with the neighborhood around it. So there is this public path that runs through it, and there are this one. And so there's also views into and out of the spaces. So where you see those dots around the corner there, those little recessed bits, that's where John Derringer and whoever you listen to in the morning, that's where they're sitting and broadcasting from. So you can actually walk under there and see them broadcast, see it all live and happening. Off to the west here, on this space here, this being Sugar Beach, we worked really closely with the people who were doing the base building. Back to the silos, it would have been really, really easy to let them just produce a building, give it to us, and then we take it to the next level. What we did was we went back and forth an awful lot to make sure that what we got was what we needed. So in terms of the demolition that needed to be done, it was a minimal budget at the end of the day. It was about $10,000 in a $50 million project, which is pretty impressive, which means that we actually managed to coordinate most of what we needed to through the process. And because Chorus signed on to a very long-term lease very early in the process, one of the things that they were able to do was to ensure that they got what they needed. So on this western face, we did a set of very large overhead doors that pull up so that they can have, so that they can open up to the beach and have concerts. So again, tying into the neighborhood plan for having this building be something which engaged the public. Here's one of the spaces. On the wall there, you'll see all that wood. That's a reclaimed wood that was actually salvaged out of the Toronto Harbor. Worked with a really small local company who does the salvage, and they produced the wood for us. Oh, that's the diagram I was looking for. So those are some of the views back into the space. The green blob there is the bio wall, which you'll see again. And that was our idea of what it was going to look like with the pink umbrellas from Sugar Beach and the garage doors open down the side. This was the first day that Chorus had their own opening within the building. So the staff moved down there. It was 1,200 staff. A lot of what this was about creating spaces which allowed and supported that idea of cross-contamination of ideas. So rather than having the radio guys, apart from the TV guys, apart from the kids can press people, they wanted to have one building that brought everybody together. So the social spaces were just as important, if not more so, than the rest of them. So when you think about kind of the morphology of the streets in terms of the neighborhood, that morphology continued into the layout of the spaces themselves. And so this was an amazing day because you got to look down and watch people go, hey, you're here too, hey, you're here. We should do this, we should do that. And so the idea down here is they have this big bench style, tables down here, and people can come down and spend time together and with each other. That's the 5-story bio wall. That was designed by Base Building, so that was already part of the building. It was just a great bonus that this was part of the space that they chose. And one of the things that you forget about with something like that is the acoustic quality. So in terms of quality of space, I think you can't have one without the other. So here we have systems which support one another, where you can create great design as well as having amazingly sustainable buildings. This was, again, the idea of collaboration. We realized that the floor plates were actually quite large, larger than we would have wanted them to be. So when we started to study how long it would take a person to walk around the space, we realized that it was too long, and people might start getting lazy, just phoning each other. So one of the things we did is we introduced this collaboration stair into the middle. The base building already had the bridges. I don't know if you noticed them. Those silver things going across are bridges. So we got to work with the base building to make sure they were where we needed them to be, and to also make sure we introduced this collaboration stair, which they put in as part of the base building work. And so it's right in the middle. It's well lit, and the idea is that people get it's low energy, vertical circulation. Just walk. Don't take the elevator. Open office space with plenty of access to daylight. Just kind of good practice. You've got the low partitions so that people can see out and so that people have access to light. One of the issues in these kinds of open office spaces is often acoustic privacy, so we made these phone booths. So if you have a very important call you need to make, you need to be on the phone for a long time, just rent out a phone booth. That's all you need to do. And so we have these. And what we did is we made everything out of demountable partitions. They decided that they figured out that one of the biggest costs to to doing business was the constant reconstruction and the amount of waste that they produced by doing that. And so that became one of the drivers when we were making decisions about what kinds of furnishings, what kind of furniture, and the lighting system that we put into here. Each of the boardrooms, there are 150 boardrooms, and the whole idea is that teams break out. They can work absolutely anywhere in the building. So each boardroom was kind of branded. Each one has their very own kind of identity. We used a lot of recycled, reclaimed materials. One of my favorites is this light fixture right here by Castor, Toronto-based company. They basically took our old light bulbs. There was one that was created out of ones that the design team, or the whole team, they basically put a call out who has what bulbs, and people brought them in and they designed the fixture from that. So really, again, to the integrated process, getting people's buy-in, getting people to participate in the project, and as the project manager, your ability to influence that is huge. I actually think one of the strongest things on this project was the fact that we had a project manager. He was very young, and he was previously a lead consultant, and he had a very, very deep understanding of issues of sustainability. So he understood when to raise the issues to have the greatest impact. And having him on the team was phenomenal because it meant I didn't feel like I needed to be at the table every single time because I knew he would raise the issue. And me, I'm one of the sustainability advocate from the architect side. We also had two other lead APs from the architect side. One was an architect, one was an interior designer. The mechanical electrical guys also had lead APs on the project. And then we had the lead consultant. And then we had the lead consultant for base building. And then we had the lead consultant for the larger development project. So you had all of these people who had this knowledge base. But the one guy from the project management side, I have to say, he's the one that really brought it all together because he's the one that was having the conversations with everybody. We spoke to people as we needed to and went to as many meetings as we needed to, but he was at the table every single time. And I just think it made all the difference. This image just shows you where all the green roofs are. I show it to you again to talk a little bit about collaboration. The green roofs were actually part of the base building side. So they had about 650 square meters of green roof. Chorus looked at what the designs were and they said, you know what, we just can't continue with this because this does not suit our needs. This isn't what we want. This isn't how we plan to use the space. We want people to use the space. And so there was an exercise where we engaged a landscape architect from our end to work with us and with Chorus to help them with their vision. And this is what we ended up with. It's a fantastic space, really. And it hasn't really grown in yet. I think they had just planted the day before. And I put this slide up again just to remind you again about the integrated design process. This next project was the design competition, which we did with Sauerbruch Hutton, a company out of Berlin. And so if you look at that first pre-design phase, this was all pre-design, and it was an amazing, amazing process. So it was for the School of Architecture at U of T, There is an existing building there, old brick building, beautiful old building, which had been just filled up with stuff over the years. You know, we need more rooms, we need more office space, we need more studio, we need more of that. So they just kept adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. The concept that we came up with as a team was, let's free the building up to be what it needs to be what it was designed to be. And let's see what that means and how we're going to get to the next step. Okay? So we went to Berlin for 2 days. It was fantastic. These guys, the way they worked and their processes, talk about integrated design. There were, the very first day, there were only 5 or 7, there were 6 of us. And the key driver was actually the structural engineer. And we worked with the engineering out of London, England. And the amazing thing with the engineers over there, at Xuereb specifically, is they were all cross-trained. So this guy was the structural engineer, but he didn't hesitate to talk about energy. He didn't hesitate to talk about mechanical issues, electrical issues. He could anticipate these issues as we were talking about them. And so this is just, these little diagrams down the side were just various diagrams that we explored. We would sketch things throughout the meeting. He would send off those sketches to his office in London. They would put together these stress diagrams. No, you need support over here. Yes, you can. This is how you'll do it. And so we were able to work, again, to this iterative process. We went back and forth with this kind of free-form design. And these guys produced, for every single design that they did structurally, they produced these very quick diagrams. Okay, it was just kind of shot in the dark. How sustainable is this? If we think about sustainability in terms of all of its issues, where's the material coming? How hard is it for people to put it together? What are the social implications? All of these things. And so they did one of these diagrams for each of them. This is what they ended up with. So from there, we started working with the landscape guys. The landscape guys were working out of Boston. So this was an international team. And so we started to say, okay, well, coming from the structure, what can we do here? We've got an existing building. We're going to be adding some program to it. How do we go about tackling this? And so their idea was, why don't we use the stresses within the building as our way of organizing our landscaping, okay? And so you can see there's kind of darker, and so there's high, medium, low. That's what they said. And so they said, well, this is basically how the kind of the weight of the planting, how it would work with that. Okay, and so they just came up with some very simple things, diagrammatic things, approaches to how they would deal with it. The next day, the guy, the head of sustainability from Xuereb London showed up. I'm not actually sure what he was trained in, because he could talk, like he was even better than the structural guy. The structural guy was still there, but this guy was, anyways. So he said, there's just a few things you need to think about when you think about sustainability. First of all, it has to be beautiful. That was the first thing he said. He said, but you're an engineer. Well, okay. So it has to be beautiful. He said, for something to be sustainable, people have to love it. If they don't love it, they're not going to care for it. So, 1, we're getting there. It's already becoming something. 2, you need to think about energy. And 3, you need to think about cost. Can the client afford it? If you can't think about all of those things together, then it doesn't work. Then it's not truly sustainable. So again, back to this idea of freeing the building up to do what it needs to do. There was this complicated, bits and pieces HVAC system. They said, what would happen if we let this building do what it's meant to do, which is to breathe naturally? Can we do that? And what kinds of things would we need to do? And so part of what we did was we cut open the atrium space, and we said, okay, that's going to be our chimney. And then our new building is going to be up above that, our new area. And so it was all about the technologies that you would need to do that. And so a very important thing was solar shading and the type of windows. And so we looked at these, the windows that they use in Europe, I have to say, are triple glazing is not unusual. Where here it barely is. And so they were talking about using a triple glazed window where the outer pane had a trickle vent that allowed the air to come in, and then it got heated within the panes of glass. And so you're preheating this air, and then it's just coming into the building. So you're getting your natural air, and it's heating as it comes in. I mean, it's really kind of ridiculously simple. And talked about providing solar shading as well to prevent it from overheating. Because one of the problems within the space was that it was overheating. So people were putting in the studios, were taking, I'm sick of this, and they would take the paper and cover the windows with it. So all of a sudden it was dark, and we were turning the lights on. And so through these conversations, we started to understand kind of more deeply what the issues were and how to tackle them. This I thought was interesting because they were talking about the time about people's expectations. And you can't, again, back to the people factor. I think the people factor is one of the biggest things in all of this. Is you can't really underestimate, what an impact they have. What's a comfortable temperature for you? I'm in a sweater, and the guy beside me is in a t-shirt all year round in my office. That's crazy, And so he was saying, well, what if we said, you know what, it's acceptable to have 28 degrees for 64, I can't remember what the number was, for 175 hours during the year. For 175 hours. The rest of the time, we're anticipating it'll be more this temperature. But for 175 hours in the year, from what we're projecting, based on what we've modeled, it's going to be this temperature. Can we accept that? And so even putting those kind of ideas on the table to me was exciting. Because most people here would say, naturally ventilate in Canada, are you crazy? But these guys were coming up with real solutions, and these solutions, they were architectural, they were mechanical, they were all of it together. And then this was a series of diagrams for how to build it, okay, and the spaces that we impacted. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But really where it was, I think that to me the biggest point is that in terms of project managers or facility managers need to be at the table from day one. If they are, you get a much better product. And plus you have the buy-in of the facility manager, and training doesn't need to be done as a separate thing, it's done as part of the process. Like at Chorus, where the people that will be running the broadcast facilities we're part of the process. They had an internal team that was managing the project from their side. And so within that we have the measurement and verification, for instance. These people are now enabled, they're now energy literate. They now know what their process flows are. And believe me, in radio and broadcast, we've never seen a blacker industry, okay? It is the furthest from green. But in terms of certainly, virtualization of servers was the main thing that they did, so that people could work anywhere within their building. Again, back to this idea of cross-collaboration. Well, here we found a technology that supported that, such that at one point we had designed a server room, and at the end of the day, we only used 10% of it because of this technology. Yet they had the ability to store the amount of video footage that has ever been produced in the world. They can produce that and sit and store that. And these people can work kind of in any way. So we have this thing which supports the way that they work, supports the environment that they're in, and it made sense. And so that's an example of that. And again, the project manager, having him involved in the whole part, made a huge difference. I could go on, so we'll just stop there. Any questions? Yep.
So you've kind of posed two different sides here. First is the integration of the silos, but then also you talked about all these people in Europe that the ones that are cross-trained seem to be the best performers. So do you think project teams are moving towards kind of the master builder side where everybody knows everything, there's just more of them because we need them for buildings? Or is sustainability going to be kind of a bridge that everybody knows and makes all these silos work together?
I hope sustainability is a bridge for that. I think that being in our separate silos, I think it costs money. I think it means there's a lot more error on project. The speed at which we need to produce projects these days is often crazy, where you're going from a sketch to a built building in 18 months. It's pretty crazy. So the more people understand multiple things. So I mean, I'm a generalist. I really am. Like I don't know a lot about anything, but I know a little about a lot. which makes me useful as a project manager, right? It makes me useful in terms of asking questions at the right points in time in the process. Working with the Europeans was incredibly interesting, again, because of their cross-training. I hope we're moving more towards that, but more and more, we are finding people who have been, working within this process and do have a broader working knowledge. I had a structural engineer from Yalis that I worked with that could do that. He could flip back and forth. And it really is a pleasure to work with people that can do that. Are we moving towards that? I hope so, but I feel like we still have a pretty long way to go.
I was just curious who built the green wall and who's maintaining it.
It's Morgard is they're the company that is maintaining the building itself. The green wall was designed by the base building architect, Diamond & Schmidt, and they work. See, they've done a lot of university buildings. They've done 3 or 4 of them now. I think they did one at Cambridge and what's that?
It's Enermodal.
Okay, so it's the same group.
They're the only ones that do green walls
And they've been,
or in Ontario.
And they've been working together for a long time. The first one I saw was down at Spadina in Richmond, and it was just a really, really tiny one. And there's actually, the ventilation goes through it, so it provides humidity, and it also cleans the air, as opposed to just being plants on a wall. The air is actually pulled through it, which is what I think makes their product so interesting. But they partnered and did some kind of research and development through the universities, through Guelph. They've done some amazing work.
Alan started it, and I think Guelph was the big first project. Was it
I
not?
think that was their big one. I've heard this.
They've got one at the Robertson building as well.
Oh, yeah? Anything else?
So how much are the course people loving their building? Do you get feedback from them?
Do you know, it was mixed because you had a lot of people coming out of their silos. You had a lot of people who had their own offices, who were off in their own building, and all of a sudden they're in a building where the guy who, president of the company is there every day in an open, workspace. So I think it was a bit of a mix at first, but I think they did a really good job of bringing people in and getting them to buy in and engaging people in the process. That's my take on it. And I think that I think whenever people move into a new building, I think you have to give it a year while people get used to it. I mean, one of the best things was opening the door of the bike room and going, because it was full, right? It's right on the waterfront. It's an amazing ride to get there, especially if you're living downtown. And so it's those sorts of things that are kind of small successes. But I look forward to seeing how they're doing in 6 months. I think it gets better and better as the systems and the kinks in the system are worked out. I mean, the fact that you could sit, right up on top of there, this is a big TV studio here, and then this slide goes up to a big workspace up above. And just seeing people sitting there and working on their little laptop and knowing that they're splicing together footage and they're doing it from that location, you think, okay, I think that's the difference that it's made. Yeah.
Do you make a habit of going back to buildings that you've helped construct and see how, you had a vision and then how you thought people would end up using the building, and then do you make a habit of going back and see what the reality is?
I think it's something, one of the things that we're trying to do as a firm is we're trying to move those things into our normal processes, because I think you can really get caught up in doing the work and forget to go back and do those sorts of post-occupancy evaluations.
Yeah,
and I think it's critical. And Chorus has actually been a really good one for us in terms of we're using it as a bit of a guinea pig for moving forward types of things that we do on a project once they're complete. And I do think that that's going to be part of it, will be the post-occupancy evaluation. We had a building that we did in the late 90s that was part of the CMHC initiative where we had done cogeneration. And CMHC followed up with me recently about it. We went back, and so I got a chance to go back to the facilities guys, which was exciting, and to talk to them and say, so, still working the way you thought it would. And the guy was so enthusiastic, and I actually think back to the people factor, like even like within facilities, like depending who it is that's running and managing the building, he bought in during the design process, and even afterwards he continued to keep that kind of energy going within the building. And I do think that that has been as much the success of it. So if you were to think about kind of what matters, like in the, design is about 30%, The other part is commissioning, so getting the systems to work properly. And then the other part is how you run it, and the people factor. So I think it's all of those things that create that contribute to sustainable design.
Okay, Michelle, did you want to touch on the Toronto?
Oh, right. I'm also on the CAGBC local chapter, and I'm volunteering for Greenville 2011. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a conference that up until now has been run out of the US. It's the first year that it's coming to Canada. They're expecting 25 to 30,000 people. It's huge. They're taking over the entire convention center, the largest expo of green building that we'll probably see here for some time. So there'll be like a trade floor, and then there's tons of sessions that you can go to. If you are 18 to 25 and you volunteer 8 hours at the conference, you get in for free, which is pretty huge. Okay, I think it costs about $600 to go to it. It's in October, but I'm going to leave this poster here.
Yeah, sure.
You can copy it and maybe hang it up. But I think it's definitely worth going to the website there, checking it out, and linking in if you're interested.
Okay, thanks a lot, Michelle. How about a round of applause for our speakers here today? Well, so I hope you took a lot out of the session today. I really appreciate you guys coming. Not only did we get some real-world experience straight from the professionals, but we also got a glimpse into what sort of our future might hold in sustainability through facility management and project management as well. If you'd like to get a hold of any of these speakers, feel free to speak to one of our board of directors. I'm sure they'd be happy to take down an email and get you in contact with everyone. So once again, just like to thank Honeywell for funding this event. I'd also like to thank the IFMA board of directors here for holding the event, getting the speakers all together and organizing it. And thanks again to every one of you, and hopefully we'll see you at the next focus session. Thanks.